And yeah. How about you guys? Where are you?
So welcome to this new book news reading, celebrating books published during the pandemic lockdown. My name is Karen Schubert, and I'm the director of Lit Youngstown, a community-based literary arts nonprofit in Northeast Ohio. The New Book News series receives support from the Natalie and James Andrews Foundation and the Ohio Arts Council. And I would like to invite you to a reading this Wednesday, May 5th, featuring memoirist Chris Harris and poet Kelly Kirksey, both of Cleveland. More information at lityoungstown.org. So thank you for joining us, and congratulations to these poets on their new books. Genevieve Kaplan is the author of In the Ice House, published by Hen Press, and 4 chapbooks. She lives in Southern California, where she edits the Toad Press International chapbook series, publishing contemporary translations of poetry and prose. Her new book is Aviary, published by Veliz Books. Genevieve.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. It's so nice to be here today with everybody and to get to read for Lit Youngstown. It's been, strange for us all, I know, having books come out during the pandemic. And I'm going to read from my book Aviary today from Veliz Books. And it came out in March 2020. So like just when we started locking down. So most of the readings I've done have been on Zoom, but I'm really grateful for this community that we have on YouTube and Zoom and our virtual reading series. It's so nice to be a part of them. So as I said, I'm going to read mostly from Aviary, and then I think I'll probably end with a new poem just to show you that I can. A flutter of modest aspiration. As I thought I could pick it up, thought I could pick some up, watched the birds hop through the wide wire of the fence, happily, like it was nothing. Watched the weeds grow in their rows, watched the stalks thicken, the calls over the next fence, childish coos, the parking lot separating us, the squirrel there, the children in a line, the bird posing with its feet on the wire, the sun happily, as if to own a word, as if to live off the land. As if to shake it down, reach in through the bent wires and ease up a leaf, adjust a stem of a vegetable, to be seen from the porch across the way, to hear the voices carry through, angry, through, as if I could pick them up, as if I had brought my gloves, if the key opened the other door, if the pile of dead leaves was more than for mulch, and sending messages into the upper air and waiting for them to drift back down. Because that's the morning and the afternoon of it, the memorization of that cut sea, the memorial of that day, the grass dug up, the site closed off but unprotected, that similar duty of my hands, my feet, that same sea I wandered through, the same lot. And I wouldn't know what to teach them, and I wouldn't be able to want to be seen, and I'd reach for the bird to tell it, wait, I dreamt it for you. So the poems in this book are mostly written, I went out into garden spaces like public gardens and private gardens around Southern California to write most of these poems. So I took my pen and my notebook physically and sat on a bench. And then one of the things that I was trying to do in a lot of these was to really capture the movements and sounds and gestures of the trees, or the feeling of the self being in the space and also not in the space at the same time. So hopefully you'll hear some of that coming through as I'm reading. What would you like us to be? Lovers, children, tall birds claiming the uppermost branches, the bounty littering the ground. Where would you like us to go? How would you like us to attend? Call to ease, a shadow pushing through the blossoms, imagining the path. Charming, cheerful, not hanging much on the details. The bird uses its beak to disconnect the flower, the petals flung from the tree, whole blooms of them tossing pink to the ground. Nothing has gotten more beautiful, unless it's a secret entrance, exit. A tremor of ribbon. The creek brushing past or the rocks that surround it, the path wavering up the low hill, dotted, strewn, bent, with dry leaves and the slight wind that comes to turn the trees, show them off, lean them down, the bench from which to watch, the spinning leaf, the wandering hair, the shudder from above against the click of the mechanical, chains strung up together, married like people do. The sign which informs, the letters to reveal us, each lift in the rock, a purposeful irony, a faceless opening, the net under the grass to catch us if we shift about, empty streambed, useless container, rainwater collector. As the voice moves along down the path, stop and sway, pause and look, point on a favorite, so unapologetic, rhododendron, the type of shout that travels, the poem that stabs despite inaction, that pauses to pose in silhouette and bounds forward, body like a bending river, body is a short-haired animal and uncomfortable in being so observed. So one of the other threads that sort of weaves through the poems in Aviary is its relationship with a poem by Mina Loy. And Mina Loy's poem is a prose poem that's called Ladies in an Aviary. And it's sort of a, it's a metaphorical imagining of women dressed in finery with, jewelry trapped inside a bird cage. And it's supposed to be, like I respond to it like it makes me uncomfortable in a lot of ways. And I think that is what she wants, right, is to make us uncomfortable by thinking about women trapped and performing in this manner. And so, as I said, a lot of the poems in here are sort of in conversation with that one poem. And so, and one way in which I do it is I borrow some of her language from the prose poem. And this next poem that I'm going to read borrows a line from Mina Loy's poem. So the first line of my poem is from her poem. And then the rest of the lines that follow are sort of permutations of that line. So I was sort of exploring what else I thought that line could do and how it might evolve. Ladies vary. They are so lovely and they cannot get out. They are lovely, yet they cannot get out. They are so lovely, so they cannot get out. So they are lovely, but they cannot get out. They are lovely, for they cannot get out. They are so lovely, for they cannot get out. But they are so lovely, they cannot get out. So they are so lovely, so they cannot get out. They are lovely, or they cannot get out. They are so lovely, and they cannot get out. Here is love. In the street, beneath the tree, upon the sidewalk, in the arms, in the branches, between the clouds, in the shade, in the morning, against the curtain, below the sunlight, against the flowers, across the lawn, among the blue pincushions, the biting lilies, the stranded screen, against the rock wall, in the awning, beneath the draperies, in the meadow, against the river, in the dust there, in the earth, among the daylight, the ivied leaves, within the boundaries, up the driveway, after the culvert, under the shelving, in the garden, circled by scenery, in the sunlight, in the breeze, under the blue spruce, against the fan palm, in the grove, adrift in safety, wrapped by end lines for an occasion, inside the park, beyond the entrance, in the clearing, in the dry river, below the hawk bleat, on the road, in the density, in the coming upon it, in the woodland, in the garden, in the cleared land, among the policies of the soil, in the reclaiming by the water, beyond the watchers, in the care by the entrance, in the thick of it, beneath bare branches, in the leaves, adjoining the causeway, in the lighting, in the spyglass, in the sanity, in the asking along the road, in the coming, in the distance, in the observed near the maple beside the sunlight, in the strewn leaves, among the animals, in the night sounds, in the leaving, by the open field, in the asking, in the description, in the enclosure, by the deed. Maybe next week, maybe the week after. The meadow wrapped in plastic, someplace I hadn't known, maybe. An insect, animal peeking out from under, a leaf spinning on a web, simple in the air, even among those bees, so many on the blue flowers, behind them, over the light and hairy moss. On a shining rock, ants astride the path, the hose, the seeing that occurs, because I'm here, because birds' voices travel. In the always accidental discovery, the bee that has discovered me, gooseberry, mountain mahogany, voices up and out behind them, most likely not. Different, comma, difficult. But the angle is different, the way the water falls in mists and the groups going past or each wearing hats and spinning in the rain. And the water is adjusted and a man goes out alone and each structure is a new informed place and the tree has been trimmed, topped off, and some of its branches yellowed. So what will be done there? And the bench on display and the way the dragonflies are, the cedar of the tree aching, in fact, the frolic of the water, and the past coming on by with maps and they don't know where they're going. So that path is sunny and damp at the same time. So that patch has dried up and that arc of water keeps moving in circles, spinning, showing off. It's not hard to appreciate the scene, the way everything surrounds it. You can't plan your life around the paths. You can't, and you can't see how it could have gone differently. These meadows, these fields, these treed pastures, the clicking motion of above them. Do I want to enter the building? Can I predict which drop, which mist will develop? I say the forest. I say the trees are here and I with them. I say if it's developed, the development too far along, there it is. There is my pasture. I call out alone to be sure. Thank you. I'm going to end with one more recent poem. So those were all from my book Aviary, which, as I mentioned, was sort of a project book. So all of the poems were sort of circling around some of the same themes. So I wanted to let you know that I can also not write about gardens and femininity. Although, you know, who knows? I feel like we always end up circling all the same things anyway. So I'm going to read my final poem today is a poem that was actually just published a couple of days ago. It's on the Veliz Books website as part of their Poetry Month series. So it's pretty fresh and it's about cats and self-consciousness and existentialism. So I thought I'd read this one. It suits me fine. Waking sometimes in the night, I felt some fur beneath my toes and considered kitten one or kitten two. To the right of my right foot, I thought a kitten. So I pushed my big toe, my calf closer, and in a notebook, I kept score, some track of emotions, rankings of delight or astonishment, numbers to remind myself not to contort my face and ask instead, what is the wonder of others? Sometimes I can be quite ungenerous. I thought about falling asleep again. The sheets would take me and release. I would be alive with consciousness and departed from it. To the right of my foot, I thought. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'm so excited to hear other readers.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. What wonderful poems. Thank you. The author of Awake with 9 Shades, Jennifer Sperry Steinorth, is a poet, teacher, interdisciplinary artist, and licensed builder. Her work has recently appeared in Cincinnati Review, Michigan Quarterly Review, Missouri Review, New Ohio Review, Tri-Quarterly, Plume, Pleiades, and Rhino. Her new book is Her Read, a graphic poem published by Texas Review Press. Welcome, Jen.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. Oh my goodness, Genevieve, that was breathtaking, and it made me panic that I wouldn't be able to talk, because that happens, you know, when we experience wonderful things. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Laura, and thank you all who have tuned in. So I will be reading from my book, Her Read, a graphic poem, which is an artifact of erasure. And so it's a physical manipulation. Here is the physical book, which I found. I bought a book, a discarded library text, for $1. It was called The Meaning of Art by Herbert Reed. And I thought, what kind of balls does it take to have a book called The Meaning of Art? Maybe I could take that apart. It was 2016, and I was mad about some things. And so it's a book of art criticism. A male critic who I have come to admire more than I was when I first picked up this book. He is doing a survey of art history. He looks at art history from prehistory to the recorded, to the modern era, and speaks of many artists, and all of the artists he speaks of are men. So it's a man talking about men's work. And I thought maybe I could excavate a female voice out of the man talking about men. In the particular text that I have in the third edition, the first edition came out in 1931, the third edition came out in 1951. He does include one female artist, Barbara Hepworth, who appears in subsequent editions. She's the only one, however. So I'm going to share my screen because this is a visual text, and I'm going to share images from the pages. There we go. And I'm going to read straight through, but you'll see samplings from the very beginning and the very end, and odd pages in between that I've attempted to graph together. It's a book-length poem, not meant to be individually succinct poems, but hopefully this will work. Face this book as a road or passage from what is. I hope, for the sake of completeness, with the listener in the present, I make for clarity and resurrect Francesca. I art soft in between, I art not golden. I'm a distortion of what we picture as human. I art our motives. A prim fusion of orange and plum, I poach in disaster. I art no escaping the imp factor or Barbie. I art's point, I toys view, I other in intimate value. And some of the words I will not read, like those. Only the free create the imp. Any man responds to a pleasurable discomfort. The opposite of I is equally rare. I have already a theory of imp beauty, native to my own fluctuating phenomenon, manifest in the course of history, uncertain and often baffling his own sense of beauty. To admit the realm of other. Is negation of at the bottom of acute pain? Go, oh, 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 tangle, oh, tangle. I would also suggest we become intolerable. I am a pro. I feel, then contradict Mr. J.H.O. Press, and so soften the erect on the wheel. Distort the given world. Even Aphrodite is difficult. And I, the lovely lace ruff which adorns him. But actually, we do make such a sensuous impression of vitality that a man sees and feels the object, sees its universal imp, sees the one in many, the many in one at his peril. I remember a pain that he called fine, from which ivory, bone, silk, wool, Paris. The ass is his especial cathedral, conceived as walls enclosing a space, and as such must be viewed from within, or as a face defining a mass, and as such must be looked at from without. If we mind his rose and passage his child, amusingly he relates how pain is in the hands of a master. Even Leonardo had to touch my whole open window, as it has been called, with his manual dexterity and a scientific aim at feeling me not in control of his effects. He ran. Come hither, come nearer, the imp comes too. O wide sea, O soil, O story, O doubt, O flood, O river, O rope. I come to elope with this tomb, an intimate, romantic interlude, finally rid of Mr. Step and Mr. Gas and their fancy texts of the second coming. O heart, O human continent, over which stretch the skins of human terror. Sadism is intense. Myth and folklore, fairy tales and horror, we know too little, too much about our own righteous dog. Oh, oh, we come to be mother. Other, other, as ever, ever mother we conceive. Hand of my mom, mi mum, madre, ma mère, mama, mama soft, sinward, strange, uncontent to remain outside. But softly we hum, feeling worser and worser, slowly learning our mum's genius is buried in the cellar. Thirst is a discipline of color, of pain, a brush, a brush, a brush, and years of rain. Thirst is author and judge of mother. It makes then, passes through her fingers. Ink every vulgar mother whole story. A sung story conceives a story of mother tigers. It's the story of fashion instinct. We become symbols of humanity, forbidden, of the decorative tradition, exiles with the most sensitive skin. Please let us refashion the story. If I describe sweetness, leaves, tendrils, flowers, animals, children as a dreadful and vindictive plague, let that be a plea for intimacy, the miracle of some violent gesture in flesh, the pencil's blind relief. How we spoke one language, subterranean masters, indulging fancies between thinks. Go to, it was never Neverland, a dynasty of dumb grace we could not escape, middle age intact. The costume into which we are born is old-fashioned. In the blue of war, over yellow roads, in cities on stage, in plastic wards, bare-faced and desert-shorn, we have borne masters. No memory of an unborn master. Yet must we be born one or the other? Could we be neither and wonder? Limitations are obvious. He, his he, compose he of the he from the he before him, his subjects given him by his he. One may tremble to conceive such a superman. For to part his he from he pains and pains her, he and his. I, medium, weep. His eye, the whole canvas, our eye waters closing to attend. What under and under the troubling sings. Of lake, the lake of the lake we make of she. And still we cannot speak. Why her silence with its dark and overnourished forms must be a tinkling of bells, graceful and fugitive, deal, no. If you are erased, if the hand you see in the stone remains buried, if you dare to be no man's hotel. Freedom, freedom come to me. Within our walls, you need no discovery. Say, freedom, freedom comes, oh, other in me. Sacred rage. And this is the last sequence of the book. In view of the sea, in view of the hearse of time, what place should be given to words, scenes, figure studies of oneself, of any self in transit? In this our one flight, in light of the sea of tranquility, the tranquility of a mind no plea can move. What good are temples to the moon, unless to set ablaze a face otherwise occupied by islands? Why draw lines between us if not to execute the distance between us, if not to let an interior be read, to be very vividly red and green and yellow, blue and green, such that we do not destroy one another when we bleed together. For each we realize the self is liquid, lacework, holy water, glass, a conception obliged to transpose as green for red with a beloved, and the beloved is known by many names and by the desire to renounce one name and take another. Sweet pea, lion, pussy, Ernie, fire, flower, thou, spear, angel, Amado, Romeo, Grace, she, Queen V, he, they. We love to embrace the danger. We art to toy with feeling, transposing one kind of fear, one kind of love for another. We art to toy with memory, those plastic dreams, to fix in concrete, as if a kiss were anything but goodbye, as if to unknow the marble profile of goodbye, as if to return to the dream of the unborn calling, and in the place the book is buried, plant a tree. Amen. Amen. We art to toy with alternatives, by touch to cure, by love to infect, not a man speaking to men, but grief, grief and a patchwork spring, whereby we come to embroidery and sing. We art to transmute pain, pain, that germ that plays upon our nerves, patient as nurses, who testify to our fragility like a Greek chorus, pain into wonder, homage, moonlight, horseshit, pity, wool, stone, velvet, impetus, a war, dawn, relief, salt, furniture, vision, a bridge. When vision is communal, it becomes religion. We art. This is God's image. Or only hands on the walls of a cave. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Laura Van Prooyen is the author of 3 collections of poetry and is the managing editor of the Cortland Review, founder of Next Page Press, and lives in San Antonio, Texas. Her new collection is Frances of the Wider Field, published by Lily Poetry Review Books. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, Karen. Thank you for having me here. And in conversation with such astonishing poets, Genevieve and Jen, what an honor to be here with you tonight. I'm just going to jump right into a poem and tell you a few things as I go along. This is called Lilacs Full of Bees. Didn't I just tell this story? Didn't Frances just clean her gutters? Didn't she polish her car? Take a toothbrush to the white-walled tires? Didn't Frances say, just a minute? With what voice? Didn't she listen to the radio in the dark? Didn't she have feet? Didn't she soak them, rub her corned toes? Who here knows the story? I remember an organ and hymns from another time in another language. Is a sigh a word? Is a body a word? Is a tongue the beginning? I can't undo these questions. Who remembers the clothesline, bleached sheets, the lilacs full of bees? Where there's a voice, there's an answer. Didn't Frances say, don't forget my hairbrush, my slippers, my teeth? Weren't you there? Weren't you listening? Didn't she have hands? Don't you hear me? Isn't this your story? So sometimes people ask me, who is Frances? And I just want to share, so I'm away from home and I don't actually have the book with me. I'm reading from my screen, but I happen to have this postcard tucked in my purse. So you get to see the cover and this wonderful image from a sculptor I found. And my answer has become to that question, who is Frances? This poem has become my answer. And I answer with like, what is Frances? And this poem is called Location, Frances. When I say Frances, I mean the maple trunk bulging through chain link. I mean the pit bull with spiked collar who lives on the other side. I say Frances, and I sound like a leaking bike tire. Frances, my purple Schwinn, my flowered banana seat, my legs pumping through the subdivision that springs from the field. Frances rides on the air. You might say, I don't understand. And I'd say, this is not my voice. It's something in the leaves that keeps speaking. Something that saw me as a child, rubbed a coin on the sole of my foot. When I say Frances, I mean a woman. I mean a place. The dead cling to the land. The living cling to a story that, like currency, changes hands. So you see that I'm grappling a little bit here with some story, and a little bit of the backstory is that on a literal level, I was writing this book into absence, that my mother's mother died giving birth to her. And this was a story withheld from my mother. So she had to, through her lifetime, collect shards of it. And when I was about a teenager, she shared this story with me. And I realized how much this absence was a looming presence in our lives, in my mother's life in particular. But then it became a part of it. So I was really writing toward the story, and honestly thinking about how to reclaim some voice to what was lost and what was denied in particular. This is called My History in Sand and Light. My mother was having one of her days. She lay on the blanket in the sun too long. Her egg salad sandwich beside her spoiled. I know this because it's the story she told. Sand filtered under the floor mats when she drove. Sand stuck to her calves. Inescapable for days in her hair and clothes. I was not there. I was light, if I was anything at all. The air unobstructed by my height. Gnats swarmed the forsythia. She swore they'd burn from the yellow. It hurt her eyes. In the house, she asked questions of the dark. She poked the window shade with a nail. Her future was listening, so she spoke again. And I was happy that this book actually came out while my mother is still here in the physical world. However, she has dementia, and so she's slipping in these ways. And so then it's another sort of other memories denied. So this is Head of Clover, sort of an imagining. Inside my mother's head of clover, we find a wider field. Thicker, ruddy air, and a girl standing by the road. She is the one who lost her mother, the one who as a baby had her face scrubbed, a gold bracelet fitted around her fat little wrist. What a clean motherless baby in patent leather shoes. The girl's legs are long now, and in the open, a speck on the wide horizon. She rolls the cuffs of her jeans. She pulls out her bike. Plowed rows haven't yet been planted. Crows haven't yet come to pick the seeds. Does the girl ride? Does she cross the creek, head to town? Clover, so much clover pushes out dull white blooms. It must be afternoon. The girl ties the tails of her checked blouse into a knot at her waist. Either way, the road is long. So in my childhood, I won't give you too much, except to say that on Sundays, like it or not, we had roast. We went to church, we came home for a midday meal, and we had roast, and then we went to church again that night. And I really did not like this meal very much. And as a teenager, I think I sat with an empty plate just out of rebellion for like a year. But anyway, this is called Sunday Roast. It's a gravy-stained apron, a can of peas. It's summer, snap, fresh beans. It's winter, Roast is roast is roast is a holiday turkey. A deviant turkey is lighter gravy is put out the floured china, please. Leave the cracklings in the pan, add starch, slow stir. Roast done right falls apart. Snivel cheese is small shreds of, in this case, meat, the best and tastiest that never make it to the table. Roast, forever roast, mashed potato forever, followed on a good day with sweet treats, followed with a toothpick. Roast forever the platter, forever roast the fat slick. It almost sounds like I liked it. A room that remembers laughter is not empty. I curl to sleep and smell from under my nails onions I've been chopping. It's true, Francis. Lemon and vinegar would help, and I don't know how to pray. Even without a body, you're both cataract and sight. Do you blame me, the scuffed floor, the unpolished shoe? My unruly garden shelters skunk. Fire ant mounds dot my lawn. Feral cats mark my house. Cleanliness is next to godlessness, or never mind lipstick left on my glass. I used to wear a gold ring fat with pearls, but didn't know dishwater would make it lose its luster. I soaped stains with Fell's naphtha and still did not add a single hour to my life. It's okay with me to grow afternoon drowsy with wine, eased by trampoline springs, squeaking under the weight of girls. So Francis has become many things, and this is called Francis of the Cadillac. And sometimes people asked me too, is Francis a saint? Francis of the this and Francis of the that, and that would be okay with me. Francis of the Cadillac. Under her tongue, there was a story. In her mouth, nails. Frances hammered license plates to the back wall of her garage. There hang the years that sunk like a foot in loose soil, that rusted like a hinge. Whose hand or what machine etched the numbers that cruised along in the exhaust of a town that no longer exists? This is what happens when I check my wristwatch. Frances drives her leather-topped Cadillac between the electrical signals of my brain. There's a railroad crossing, and I don't understand the way she's looking at me. Her body tells me something happened. Her arms so thin, veins show when she rolls up her sleeves. Still, if I were drowning, I know Frances would save me. She might throw a string of black pearls. She might offer a broom handle worn from her sweeping. She'd pull me to the edge, push pennies from my lungs, but it's the bells of the crossing that make it hard to breathe. I'm going to read two more. This one is called Going Home. In my mother's house are many mansions. In her house, 200 Sunday dresses hang by their necks. Sheet music swallows the room where Elvis first appeared on Ed Sullivan, where 67 Christmas trees shone in the window and 10 clocks mark 11 different hours. In her house, I am a lost child. I rethink Dickinson to the tune of Amazing Grace. Rethink Jenny and me in the dim garage lifting our shirts, the nearby church bells striking us out into sunlight without a word. Her house is a hand-cranked music box, looping Lennon's Imagine, or That's the sound in my teeth. The house is an adjustable skate, the missing key. It's a sewing basket that has been passed down, and in it, a bright cushion stuck with pins. And I'll close with Frances of the Pleiades. Thank you again, everyone, for your kind attention and for sharing the space with me. The afternoon has grown quiet, Frances. My cat's ear turns toward the sound of chimes. If I said God is in the air, I could as easily have said the child's uncreased face is a revelation. What does this matter to you? You're the jingle of keys. You're the motorcycle revving a block away. See, today was full of auspicious signs. And though you never believed in stars, it's you rising as my neighbor scuttles home from work. Is it wrong to say there's something luminous in my blood? Is it possible that the girl who buried the gecko covered you with stones? Frances, of all things and of no things, don't get angry when I sing the wrong words. Don't forget the peppermints, white as stars wrapped in tissue. Memory cannot undo the future. Frances, if I said, tonight I thank the seven sisters, it's really the blue dust of God between them, or you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. The way these books intersect is incredible. Genevieve, I was wondering if you would open the conversation, please.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I was so excited when I saw the names of my co-readers and the books that they had written. I just feel like, I don't know, Karen, you outdid yourself by making all of this magic happen here today. So I feel like I have like 50 questions that I would love to ask both of you, but I know that we don't have time for that. I was trying to think about like all the different resonances that I saw between our three books, which was pretty exciting to me. Like, I feel like all of them are very interested in playfulness in terms of like form and perspective and coming at poems in new ways. Also, all of them sort of, I think, take on themes of like femininity and womanhood and being a woman in the world, which I thought was really interesting. And another thing that I picked up on was sort of this like wrapping of the self, like the I or the narrator in the poems within other people or around other people or being observed by others, which I thought was totally fascinating. And now that I've said that, I think I'm going to go in a totally different direction with this question, because I was thinking about as you were both reading, I was really excited in terms of thinking about like the construction of these books, like the manuscript making of these books, how these books came to be. And I did notice that both of you really have, like, you follow a clear thematic project through your books. Jen, like, you use the source text, obviously, throughout your book. And so that's sort of like a confining limitation, but I'm sure also a freedom in some really exciting ways. And then Laura, you of course keep returning to the beauty and sort of wonder of Frances. And so I was wondering if both of you could talk about sort of like the limitations that you encountered while you were working on these kind of like project-based books. And then also what kind of like new writerly freedoms or ideas you uncovered because you were working within these projects. So I'd love to hear more about that.
I'll jump in since I'm still unmuted. I'm delighted that you see this as a project, because it didn't start that way for me. I didn't conceive of this as a particular project. The Frances poems all sort of came in a moment of time over about a year, and I knew they were relating to other concerns. For instance, trying to come at the personal narrative of some of those things I mentioned before, but to come at them in such a way that it wasn't a recognizable narrative. I wasn't really interested in just telling a straight linear story about what happened. And then amazingly, this character of Frances revealed this herself to me. And then I had the book built around it. It went through many different things. So it wasn't a very neat project for me. And I will say it was one that spanned about, if I'm honest, from start to finish, nearly 10 years, like of building this book. So maybe more like 7, but the oldest poem in here is kind of old. So, but, and I'm interested in both of you. I love this question, by the way, because it was along the lines of something I wanted to know from both of you.
So I feel like I'm still feeling my way into, like, I want the question again, but I will try. I I love these observations that you made, Genevieve, and was so marveling at them as well. And I think for me, the idea of a constant self had to dissolve as I was encountering the strict limitations of the text. So one of the rules, I would create rules and then break the rules when I felt like I had reached the end of a place and I'd like encountered a space where I'm like, this is what has to be said and I can see how to do it, but I have to break the rules. So now I'm going to break the rule, and now that rule is going to be broken, and I will from there on out like continue with that broken rule. So the rules kept evolving. And but one of the things that Kate stayed the same was that all of the language had to come from one single copy of the text, and it had to mostly stay in the same order. Although there were some places where I cut out pages and overlaid them, and then then things got a little bit out of order in that way. But I felt like I had to keep inventing new. I would see a new opportunity, and then would have to figure out what is the strategy to make that work, like make that language work. And so one of the things that happened with the constraints is part of the visual imaging that would come into play had to do with helping the reader to see the line the way I wanted the line to be read. And so needing to make marks, and like what do the marks need to look like, or there's not enough on this page to convey the layering that I'm seeing. So what else is happening imagistically that I can use to sort of lift some layers up out of the text? I don't know if that answers the question, but can I like throw the question, like, will you also answer that question, Genevieve?
Well, I will try now that I too have kind of forgotten what my question was, but I really loved both of your answers. I mean, I feel like the process, like the surprise of writing poetry, or like the surprise of finding a way into a poem, or finding a way into like a coherence of poems, is one of the things that I love most about writing and being a writer. And so for me, I guess with Aviary, like I started this book by writing about, like, I had a bird feeder on my back patio, like on this little enclosed back patio. And so I was writing, like trying to sort of capture the sounds and the activity and the movement of the birds, which was really exciting. But then also, like, I don't know, it was a 10 by 10 patio, and like how much you're going to write with that. So like I sort of kept doing it. But then at some point during my writing process, I was reading Mina Loy and came upon this Ladies in an Aviary poem. And that sort of just like, I don't know, it leapt into my heart. And I was like, oh my gosh, the idea that I have could be so much more, so much bigger, so much different. Like her perspective really allowed me to think about birds in a new light, to think about enclosure in a new light, and to think about, I think also like the idea of putting myself in the book, or like putting my body in the space, was something that was really exciting for me as I was writing, like as a way of changing up the poem, or as like a writer, a way of changing up how I approach poems. So that was something that happened, I guess, during the writing of the book. That was really fun for me as a poet.
Thinking about the way that there's I'm sure probably you're familiar with John Berger's book, Ways of Seeing, I think it is, right? And this idea of like women, and I'm annoyed that that's the first book that comes into my mind to bring this up, but this idea of being outside oneself, it seems to me that all of us are bringing perhaps like our own selves into these other selves, that are sort of speaking. And I'm just curious about that, what kind of freedom / voyeuristic discomfort of, like, one, being outside the self, looking at the self, and two, realizing that you're a part of a sort of the performance of self, but from the voyeuristic part of the performance, if that makes any sense.
I think that's like such a big, amazing question. And I really am interested in all of the parts of it. And I think that this is maybe heading on a slight tangent of it, but it was reminding me as you were speaking of one of Laura's poems. So you have all those Frances poems, but then you have the Jenny poems. And I really loved 13 Ways of Living Next to Jenny, which is like such a slippage of the self. And so I guess Jen's question kind of reminded me of thinking about that poem and thinking about, you know, the I in the poem and the one who is living next to Jenny, but is not who's being portrayed in the poem is fascinating. So I wonder if maybe you could respond to both of those questions somehow, Laura. I don't know. Sure.
And thanks for the kind words on that poem too. You know, Jenny was another interesting figure. Sorry, I don't remember exactly what the question was, but when you were saying the question, one of the things that the voyeuristic and the being outside of, it made me, one of the words that sprung to mind for me was reclaiming and also boundary. So I was struck by boundaries and reclaiming those concepts in all of our work as well, which I think is related because while being somewhat on the outside, or Frances or Jenny, like seeing these people, figures, Jenny's a little bit more of a person. Frances is something that's kind of almost a guide, kind of different and more ethereal and bigger, but has a body sometimes. And so it felt to me like that being outside of that and the self kind of wrapped up in it, for me, it was a way into telling some of these stories, or at least engaging with, they weren't even really telling, it was really experiencing. It was experiencing some vision of these narratives that I might not have had access to. For instance, in the case of the person I'm trying to think about, never knew, just like on the genetic level, on the cellular level, I have something embodied in me of this person who is absent. So I think those stories are coming from somewhere very, very deep and kind of reclaiming the voice, but also pushing the boundary on the way we might tell things or the way we might see things and perceive them. So honestly, I have no idea if that answers your question entirely or even a little bit, but that's what I've got for the minute. But Genevieve, what about you?
Oh, see if I can remember the question.
Well, I guess here, let me just refine it a little bit. I was really moved by, like in both of your texts, those ideas of reclaiming and of boundaries and of maybe pushing the boundary, of redefining the boundary of where especially these women's voices are and what they can say and how they can be seen or perceived. So maybe it's something about that, reclaiming and voice and boundary.
Yeah, I think like finding the Nina Loy poem and also like reading Nina Loy, who writes, I guess in some ways kind of similar. I would say I write in some ways kind of similar to how she writes, but also we write incredibly differently. Like she uses a lot of metaphor and figurative language in ways that I do not. And I think having these lines from her where the women were like literal birds and also metaphorical birds, and having different uses of language. Like, for example, she has a phrase that is like, their breasts were pouting, which is not anything that I would ever write in a poem. But once I was like, oh, maybe I can use that language, maybe I can reclaim that language, or like maybe I can start writing about breasts, which I hadn't done in the past, you know? And so I think that like in your idea, Laura, of talking about like reclaiming or like changing the space that we're occupying with our bodies and with our poems, I think that I was sort of pushed to do that, or invited to do that in a different way after reading her poem. So, yeah. Jen, how about you? I know that like using that source text is obviously opening up a lot of things. And you talked a lot about violence in your intro, like how you're changing it and reclaiming it.
Yeah, I found it really freeing to be, well, first of all, it seemed like there needed to be multiple, I don't know if it's clear in the text or not, but to me it felt like, you know, it wasn't the same voice speaking all the time, that different voices were kind of scrambling out. So like a syntax might follow for a while and then like something else came up. And but that was super freeing in that I could be more vulgar sometimes, or coarse. And not that I don't, you know, have that in me to say myself, but it's like right there on the page, like I can see something, and you know, it almost felt like there was a mandate to sort of let more fly. So that almost seems like that, yeah, like it definitely felt like breaking down boundaries. But I saw that too when I was thinking about Laura's and reading Laura, the Francis in the Wider Field. I felt like I kept noting, because there's mother, daughter, and in different generations happening simultaneous to the Francis poems. And I felt this wonderful slippage happening between selves, and I didn't need to know. Like I was so pleasantly sort of riding the waves of and feeling like it was okay that I was in simultaneously different time spaces. And for me, I was, you know, as I'm slipping in and out, it was sort of a struggle to figure out like what flows. And I'm curious for you, like you said, it took like 10 years to put this together. And so like finding that ebb and flow, which also feels like birds moving, but how you made those choices.
Interestingly, after my second book, which has a ton of birds in it, I actually gave myself the mandate of no more birds. So I was working against that energy, you know, which is funny. I'm really interested in how time can collapse. Like, as you said, the past, present, future, all being in the same space simultaneously. And so that is really, I suppose it's intentional, or it's kind of just the way that I see how, like, all of these stories and narratives exist in these multiple spaces. So, you know, hopefully it doesn't generate a lot of confusion, but more like, oh, here's this one thing that's happening with this person. Oh, this person actually exists on another plane too. Or is this a person anymore? Was this a person? Is this a spirit? You know, kind of in the most literal, maybe boring sense, you know, we hold within us the people who have come before us and all of these things, but in a poetic sense, that they can exist in these simultaneous spaces and become things other than people, and in some ways even more powerful Like, I think Frances probably has a great deal of power that, had I had the privilege to know who my mother's mother, to know her in a physical realm, would have been really different. It would have been a very traditional, like, grandma story. But since I had no access to her, and neither did my mom, her absence became even a greater presence for the not knowing. Karen, I'm looking at the time, and I don't know if I have the time, but what I want to say is we didn't even address at all Jen's beautiful visual text that I don't have a question about it so much as to say how much I admired it, and the wonderful experience of engaging with those poems visually, as well as with the text of language, but then even more the real gift of hearing you read it and seeing that page by page. So I love that the conversation has been widened in that these visual texts, that this book is there, that we all have access to it and can hold it in our hands and read it. So just wanted to note that, because if we didn't even at least mention the beauty of that visual text, I wouldn't have been happy tonight.
Thank you.
That's a beautiful note to end on. I would like to thank the three of you so much for this incredible reading and conversation. And this is the last reading in this series. I want to thank the more than 70 poets and writers who have shared their new work and engaged in generous conversation. And I hope that we're all reminded of the importance of supporting new books, and many of these, if not all, from these important indie presses. Just what important part of the literary landscape they all are. So thank you again, and have a wonderful night. I wish you all the best with, in your lives and with your with these wonderful books, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Laura and Genevieve.
Thank you all so much.